Okay, good afternoon. I'm Ulrike Tillmann. I'm the director here in the Institute, and it's my great pleasure to introduce this Kirk lecture by Clement Prior. It's one of our traditions to have these special lectures to give a little bit of an insight of the programs and lectures that are addressed to a more general audience. So. Let me just say a few words about Clementine herself. She is an expert in sensitivity analysis and received her PhD in 2001. Then she was a maître de conférence and later professor at the University Grenoble at INRIA. She received the 2015 Blaise Pascal Prize, and in particular, she is also the vice president of the French Society of Statistics, and very pleased to see that also she was a previous visitor already at INI, and has many research interests. Some of them I'm sure will come out today, but she's going to speak on the feasible set estimation with Bayesian learning. So thank you very much and welcome.
So thank you very much for the introduction. Also, I would like to thank the organizers of the program, and in particular Richard, who is here. And also, I would like to say that I enjoy very much to be here in this nice working atmosphere for several weeks. So what I will present today is a work on feasible set estimation with Bayesian active learning. And first, I wanted to show you where I'm working. So I'm working in Grenoble, in France. And on the left, you can see the campus of Grenoble, surrounded by French Alps. And I'm working in that building on the right, in the Jean Kunstmann Laboratory, which is a laboratory in between math and computer sciences. And inside this laboratory, I'm working in the INRIA research team RC, which is devoted to modeling, data assimilation, and sensitivity analysis for different environmental applications. The work I will present is a joint work with different people. So first, two former PhD of mine, Clément Duhamel and Reda El Amri. It is also a joint work with IFP Énergie Nouvelle, which is a French research and training institute and specified for energy sciences, and so Miguel Munoz-Unega and Delphine Sinoquet, and with Céline Elbert from École Centrale de Lyon. So I will first make some introduction to say a few words about what is a feasible set, what is active learning, and Bayesian active learning. So I start with the definition of a feasible set. It's rather general. We have two sets, let's say calligraphical X and Y, and F, some function, some model. Sorry, what did I do? Okay, and so F is some function from calligraphical X to calligraphical Y. And now I will add some constraints. So I will take Y naught, a subset of Y, and I will say that gamma star is a feasible set associated to Y naught if it is the subset of calligraphical X, such that F of X belongs to Y naught. So it's not all the image of F, but some points in the pre-image of Y, which satisfies some constraints. Sorry. So just a very simple example. Let's take R for X and Y, and just Y naught defined by some threshold. So it's a classical example for many applications. And with that model, so here it's in 1D function, sine X plus 0.5 cosine 2X. The feasible set here is defined by the threshold 0.2. So it's just these two intervals. Okay, they are the X for which Y is less 0.2. Okay. We can also look at a toy example in dimension 2. So that time the model is defined on the unit square, and we still define the feasible set by a threshold minus 3.7. And we see here that the feasible set is delimited by this light blue line. And in fact, the feasible set is just the upper left corner here, delimited by this line. And what do we want to do? If, in fact, we want to estimate some feasible sets because of many applications, we will see later. And the only information that we have are model evaluations. That is, we are provided with a set of experimental data or a set of simulations, x1 f of x1, xn f of xn, so they are in finite number. And from that, we would like to estimate this feasible set. So let me give two naive approaches to do that, yes?
Are these observations with or without noise?
In that tool, they are without, but you can incorporate noise.
Yeah.
Two naive approaches. So the first one is just to have the idea of evaluating my model on a regular grid. So for example, here, if I take this example, I have a regular grid with 16 points. I evaluate my model on this grid, and from that, I make a prediction of my model, which allows to estimate by interpolation the boundary of my feasible set. Okay, so you see it's not perfect. Here you have the estimation is in dashed line, so you see here it's a little bit worse, but it is okay. But we are only in dimension 2, of course, and we know that with a regular grid we will have the curse of dimensionality, and we will have to increase the set of evaluation points a lot if we go on dimension. So the second example, which is better for high dimension, is to sample the points where you will simulate your model, either uniformly or more cleverly, using, for example, Latin hypercube sampling, so that the points are more regularly spaced in the square, or you can choose any non-prior. So it works better in higher dimension, and here with 16 points we do better than previously. But the drawback is still that we do not use the information given by the model. The sampling is just a sampling on the input space, and never you use some information on the model. So it is why many people turn to active learning. So what is active learning? Active learning is a way to design algorithms that learn efficiently from a small number of labeled data. So we want n to be as small as possible. And to do that, to choose which points we will choose here in the unit square, we use some strategic data selection with interactive learning. And what is important is that these approaches are uncertainty guided. Okay, so here it's rather general definition of active learning. And what is Bayesian active learning? Bayesian active learning, it will leverage Bayesian principles to manage uncertainties. So here it's just an introduction, so I don't go into detail. We will see later what it means. But just on that example, so I had 3 randomly chosen initial points, and I add only 3 red points here using such a Bayesian paradigm. And what I see is that I recover the boundary of my feasible set with these 6 points much better than previously with 16 points. Okay, and now I would like to give some motivation. Why are we interested in feasible sets in practical life? So here it is an example from IFP Énergie Nouvelle. They were interested in the pre-calibration of a wind turbine simulator. So we have a simulator that mimics the wind turbine, and we want to calibrate it. And in fact, it is a preliminary steps like Bayesian history matching. That is, we want to find a set of values for the parameters which give plausible outputs. Okay, not only one value, but a set of values which are not incoherent with experimental data. And to do that, we we will compare frequencies and vibration modes from the model with the ones that are taken from experimental data. And it is what will guide the calibration of the model. So it is one of the applications, and that model is rather complex. In fact, it is a black box. We do not go inside the structure of the model. We do not know if there are PD or any other equations inside. We can just evaluate this model and pre-calibrate it with Bayesian active learning. The second example is still a motivation from IFP Énergies Nouvelles. So that time it is on automotive depollution. So here we are interested in the system, in the control system of the vehicle. In fact, we inject some urea inside the system, and urea is reacting so that with fine particles, NOx, and it produces ammonia. So the problem is that we do not want to inject too much urea because in that case, all the fine particles will react, but you will have some ammonia, and it's not so good for environment. And you do not want to inject too small quantity because in that case, you will have some remainder fine particles on the output. So in that example, the parameters of the model are the sensor biases, sorry, and you have also another input which is uncontrolled, which is the driving cycle. Because in fact, you have rules now, European rules, that want the system to be robust to any driving cycle, not only one typical driving cycle, but any driving cycle. And we have to propose some algorithms which are robust with respect to this uncontrolled input. Okay. And here the feasible set is defined by thresholds on the fine particles and on the ammonia. And a last example, which was taken from a paper by David Gainsbourgier and co-authors, I just show it because it was a large-scale application for an inverse problem in gravimetry. And in that case, the feasible set is the region of high density inside the Stromboli volcano. Okay, so now I will go in the detail of what we do. So I will first present some approach which is based on the random set theory. And then I will show that there are some limits in terms of robustness of this approach. And so I will present another criterion which is more robust. So what is Bayesian active learning? So we have first the notion of Gaussian emulator. Why? Because in our setting, the model F is really expensive to evaluate. Each time we want to evaluate the model, it can take hours, days. So we do not want to evaluate it too much. So we will rely on some meta model, and in this framework, the meta model will be a Gaussian process. So what we do is that we assume that the deterministic black box model is a realization of a Gaussian process, Zx, and so we have a prior mean and a M and a prior covariance kernel, K, and we define gamma, which is the set of points X, such that Zx belongs to Y naught. So this set is a random set now. Okay, it's not deterministic because we have replaced the model by the Gaussian random field Zx. And then we have some model evaluations, so at some points, x1, xn. And from these model evaluations, we can compute the posterior field, Z conditioned by the observations. Okay, and we have nice formula which are well known to update the mean function and the kernel with respect to the conditioning. Okay, and then to estimate gamma star, so the true feasible set, which is unknown, what do we do? In fact, we consider that it is a realization of the random set gamma n. So now this set is the set where you have replaced the model by Z and you have conditioned by the observations that you have already. And this set is random, so it is why we turn to the theory of random sets. Okay, because we replace a deterministic set that we would like to learn by a random set. And so I recall here the definition of a random closed set. So we have omega IP, a complete probability space. Here I will consider input space a subset of RD. And calligraphical F is a family of closed subsets of X. And now what we call a random closed set is a map from omega to calligraphical F. And we have some constraint that for every compact set K in X, this subset here is, the set such that X intersect with K is non-void is in A. And why do we add this constraint? It's just for measurability issues. So it is why we have to constrain the definition of a random set. But what is important for what we want to do, it is the definition of a coverage function. So what is the coverage function? So now we take mu, any reference measure, finite measure on the input space. And what we call the coverage function, it is a function from X, the input space, into 0, 1. And in fact, to any u in the input space, it associated the probability that u is in X. So here, the randomness doesn't come from u, but from the set, which is random. Okay? And now, as the set we use is random, we would like to define some expectation. What is the notion of expectation in random set? So a definition of the expectation of a random set is the following. So in fact, we want to find some deterministic set, F, such that, so a closed set, such that the indicator of F mimics at best the coverage probability. And we will find this best set F among some candidates, and these candidates, they are the sets of the form Q alpha, so they are the set defined by Px greater or equal to alpha, with alpha in 0, 1. And now we have to say, what do we mean by mimics at best? And in fact, so a few comments. If you integrate the indicator of Q alpha with respect to the reference measure, you see that you have the volume of Q alpha. And if you integrate the coverage probability, you have the expectation of the volume of X. So what we will choose for alpha is the value alpha star, so that the volume of Q alpha star is the closest as possible to the expectation of the volume of X. Okay? And so we have the following definition of the Vorobiev expectation. The Vorobiev expectation is defined as the set Q alpha star, such that the volume of Q alpha is strictly less than the expected volume of mu of X, less or equal to the volume of Q alpha star, for all alpha greater than alpha star. Okay, and in fact, in some cases, we can find here an equality. It is the case where the function which maps alpha to the volume of Q alpha, if this map is continuous, then the volume of the expectation of the random set is exactly equal to the expectation of the volume of X. Okay, so now we have a notion of expectation for random sets, but I recall that we would like some uncertainty-guided algorithms, so we want also a measure of uncertainty. And so we will use what is called the variability, the Vorobiev deviation, sorry. So how is defined the Vorobiev deviation? In fact, the Vorobiev deviation of random set X is defined as the expectation of the volume of the symmetric difference between X and its expectation. Okay, so the expectation here, it is a deterministic set. Here it is a random set. And what is the symmetric difference? It's just the difference, the points which are in X and not in the expectation of X, union the points which are in the expectation and not in X. Okay, and it is the notion of deviation that is chosen in random set theory. And then how will we leverage these tools to make some active learning? So as I said before, we have replaced the true feasible set by this random set here, where we use the Gaussian field. And we will estimate gamma star by the expectation of this random set. And the uncertainty with respect to this estimation will be just the Vorobiev deviation. Okay, so all these tools were developed in a PhD thesis of Clément Chevalier more than 10 years ago. And also, what is important is that if you make some specific choices for the mean function and the kernel K, then you can get some separable Gaussian process. If you take some separable Gaussian process with continuous mean and covariance kernel, so for example, if you take Matern 3/2 or 5/2, then the trajectories of your Gaussian process are continuous, and so gamma n is really a closed random subset, so you can really work in this framework. Okay, and so now how do we perform Bayesian active learning? So we want to sequentially evaluate f at points that minimize a specific acquisition criterion. So we have to define an acquisition criterion, and as I said before, we want this acquisition criterion to be goal-oriented. That is, we want to estimate a feasible set, so we want to use something which is specific to feasible set. So we will use the framework of stepwise uncertainty reduction. That is, at each step, given a current design of experiment, we will choose a new evaluation point xn+1 that optimally reduces the expected uncertainty and the future estimate. So for that, we will choose xn+1 in an R minimum of the expectation of some uncertainty measure, hn+1 of x, and the notion of random sets will be used in this definition. So what do we choose as an uncertainty measure? We will choose the Vorobiev deviation, that is, Hn will be defined as the expectation of the volume of gamma, of the symmetric difference between gamma and Qn alpha n star, with Qn alpha n star the expectation, the Vorobiev expectation of gamma n. Okay, so now we have a criterion, and if we add a new point xn+1, we have here something which is random because we do not evaluate z at x because we want to choose the next point. So that we take the expectation, and it is the quantity we will want to minimize by choosing the next point. Okay, so we look in the future to choose the next point, and we also use very strongly the information that is encapsulated in the previous experiments. Okay, so let me show some numerical experiments. So here it is a toy model Branin-Hu in 2D, a function on the unit square. So it was introduced, for example, in the paper of Victor Pichny. And the feasible set is defined with a threshold C equal to 10. And here we are in a medium toy model in the sense that the total volume of this feasible set is not too small. It's about 15% of the volume of the input space. We have an initial design, so we will repeat the experiment to validate it. So we will use 100 different initial designs, which are Maximin Latina hypercube samples of size 10. Okay, so we start with 10 points, and we make 20 iterations. That is, we add 20 additional points step by step. So we have one simulation per iteration, And we use as emulator a Gaussian random field with Matern 5.5 and a constant mean. We will use two different estimators just to compare. So as I said, we will look at the Vorobiev expectation here, but we will also use at the estimator which is just defined with the predictive mean. But for each of these experiments, the acquisition criteria to add new points, they rarely use the theory of random sets, even if here you don't use in the prediction the random sets, just the predictor. In fact, in the acquisition criterion, you have used the information on the random sets. Okay, so here are the results. So we see that, so on the left we have the predictive mean, on the right you have the Vorobiev expectation. So you see it's quite similar with both estimators, and it works quite well, except for some experiments here, where you see that you have a stagnation. So here it seems that something bad happens. And so we will have a look on one of these experiments where it seems to fail. So here we see in black the initial points, the 10 initial points, in red the points which have been added. So we see that the criterion works well because we have added points on the boundary of the feasible set. The feasible set here is in blue. Except that in the case where we have stagnation, we completely miss some of the connected component here. This one has been completely missed by the criterion. So it seems that the method is not robust when you have different connected components, and in that case, we would like to propose some criterion which is more robust. But otherwise, the points you see they have been chosen in a clever way because they are not anywhere in the square, but they are near near the boundary of one of the components. Okay, so what about a more robust criterion? So here we use Gaussian random fields, so they are emulators, and when you estimate the Gaussian random fields, you estimate its parameters at each step. You have some uncertainty, and we would like to take into account this uncertainty in order to better explore. Because with the criterion which has been presented before, we have a good exploitation, but it seems that we don't explore very well the unit square because we miss some part of the square. So we will use some, we will leverage some criterion, which was introduced by Bichon, which is a generalization of the so-called expected improvement criterion, which is a well-known criterion for global optimization, but adapted for set estimation. So we first define what is called the feasible function. So we look at the distance between Zx and the threshold C. Okay, but we add some tolerance, epsilon of x, because we have some uncertainty due to the estimation of the Gaussian random field. So we want to be able to explore and not just to look at the distance to the boundary. Okay, and so we take the positive part of this gap between the tolerance threshold and C minus Zx. And then in the enrichment criterion, so either we just look at the x which maximizes this criterion, and in that case, what do? We look at the feasible function conditioned by the model evaluations that we have already done, and where we have chosen, so FFN, it is when you have chosen the tolerance here related to the standard type of your Gaussian random field. So sigma n of x is the standard type of a Gaussian random field, and kappa, it is arbitrary, you have to specify it. Okay, and so you take the expectation of that, and it defines your criterion, and you choose the next point which maximizes this criterion. Okay, so just on a picture, how does it look like? So we have here the threshold T, it's that line. We have a Gaussian trajectory here in green, and you have here you have added here to the threshold T some tolerance, plus and minus, and in fact you are just looking at points which correspond to these gray areas. That is, you just will look at X, which corresponds to Y in this area. Okay, and then you have your feasible function here, and you will choose the X which maximizes this feasible function. So here it seems to be around 1. Okay, and now we can do more. We can propose a stepwise uncertainty reduction version of this criterion. That is, we will look one step further. When one wants to choose the next point, we not look at the maximization of the uncertainty, but we look at the maximization, at the minimization of uncertainty if we add a new point. And it is what we do here. So now we recall that ff(n+1), so it is this function where here you have a standard type at step n+1. And you can, for any finite measure mu on X, a reference measure, you can define this uncertainty function where you take the expectation of fn+1, you condition with the evaluations, but also with the new point that you will choose, and you take the integral over all possible values for Zx. Okay, so you look in the future to choose the next point. So now you choose xn+1, which minimizes the expectation of this criterion. Okay, so I won't give details because I won't have time on the computation, but if you have questions, then I can show you. So the idea, each time you propose a stepwise uncertainty reduction criterion, of course, you have to find a way to compute it because it's not so intuitive. And so you have to leverage computational issues to compute this criterion. And it's what we have done in this framework. And so let us compare with what happens. So first, between the Bichon criterion and with its stepwise uncertainty reduction version. So we see, so still on the left you have the estimator just using the predictive mean, and on the right you have the estimator which is the Vorobief expectation. We don't use the Vorobief expectation to enrich the design of experiments in that case, but we use it for the estimation on the right. And we see that it is what we expected. If we make a sur version of the criterion, it is better. But the cost is higher, of course. But even here, you see that it seems that you have an improvement with respect to what we got with the Vorobief expectation criterion. That time, sometimes we have stagnation, but at the end of the day, it is still decreasing. Okay. So this criterion is much robust to different components, and it is what we will see here. So we take the same case where we missed some components with the Vorobief criterion. So here I remind you that so on the right you have the previous criterion based on Vorobief deviation, and what I said is that we didn't explore enough because we completely missed here this component. And now if we apply the Bichon criterion, the sur-Bichon criterion, we see that that time we are able to recover all the three components with the same number of points. Okay, and what about extensions of this approach if we have different outputs? Because here I just worked with a model with a scalar output, but what happens if you have a vectorial output? Can we extend the approach, and what are the limits? So that time I consider that I have P outputs, so P scalar outputs, F1, Fp, and still my input space is a compact subset of RD. And I will define different kinds of feasible sets. First, I will define each feasible set which corresponds to one of the components of the output. So gamma I star, they are just the set of points x such that fi of x is less or equal to ci. So the threshold now is a vectorial threshold, c. And I also define gamma star, which is the intersection of all these sets gamma I star. And I'm working for sake of applications we were interested in, but it's not the only framework in the applications. But here, each evaluation point led to a simultaneous evaluation of the P output components. So sometimes you can evaluate separately the components, but here, if you launch the model, you evaluate all the components at once. For the estimation of this set, the intersection, you have different vector extensions, for example, of the integrated Bernoulli variance criterion, or on the expected measure variance, and you have a surversion of these criteria. But here we were really interested in recovering each of the components. It's not the same, so it's what we see here. So we have, for example, on the left, the feasible set which corresponds to the first component. Here, the feasible set which corresponds to the second component. And if we are only interested in the intersection, we see that we want only to recover this light blue area. And we see that it's different, because if you just want to recover the intersection, you are not interested in taking some evaluations here, for example. So here we will focus on this framework where we want to estimate each of the feasible set components. And we just look the case of bivariate output, so P equal to 2. So we proposed 3 different criteria. So the naive criterion, just as set of comparison, is just we take alternatively a criterion for the first output. So we take the criterion which is the Bichon criterion for the first output, and then at the next step, we take this criterion but for the second component, and we alternate. So it's the more naive approach, the most naive approach we can choose. And the second one is based on Pareto front. So what is the Pareto front? So here we have several solutions. We have 2 objectives, so the 2 components. Okay, and the Pareto front, it means that for the points which corresponds to the front here in red, you cannot outperform one criterion for one of the components without deteriorating the other one. Okay, so they are called the optimal solutions because they are not dominated. So what we do, here we have a curve, so we will choose a point which is called the ideal point. That is, so here we are in the objective space, so that is here in abscissa you have the first objective, so it corresponds to the first component, and here at ordinate you have the second component. And we choose this point, which is called the ideal point. It doesn't correspond to any physical situation, because it is a point where you have both criteria which are maximized. And in fact, it's not possible. We have to do some compromise. But it is the point, which point we will choose on the Pareto front, because we have a choice here, and we do not know which point is the best. So what we will do is to choose the point on the Pareto front, which is the closer to that ideal point. So it's the second way to tackle the vectorial setting, and the third way is to use a vector output emulator. So in that case, we will consider that G is a realization of a Gaussian random field Z with values in RP, so Z1, ZP. So that time we have some notation to introduce. So we have knxx prime, it corresponds to all the covariances between the different components, but also to the variances. So if we take sigma nx, it's just kn of xx. And if you take I equal to j, you just recover the covariance matrix of zi. And you have also a vector of mean functions, mn1, mnp. And in that case, so once more, I won't go too much in the details, but the idea is how to extend the criterion. So what we want is to be near the boundary, but to explore by taking into account the uncertainty due to the random field, which is emulating the true set. And it is what we do here. So here we still compare, so as we are interested in not in the interaction, not in the intersection of all component feasible sets, but on each of them, we take here the minimum between the distance to the boundary, so for each boundary, and we divide by the standard type, by the corresponding standard type of the Gaussian random field, and we add some tolerance with kappa here. And here, outside, we remultiply by the determinant of the covariance sigma n of x. And in order to get something which is coherent, you take a power 1 divided by 2p. So with this criterion, we expect that first we will be not too far away from what we want to recover, that is each boundary of each component, and also to be able to catch different components, for example, by exploring in the different areas by adding some flexibility in the criterion. And once more, we have to work in order to compute this criterion efficiently. And so there are some numerical experiments. So for each component, we will measure the error as we will measure the error as the volume of the symmetric difference between the true set and its estimation that we renormalize by the volume of the true set for each of the components. And we also compute the sum of the two errors. And once more, we use the 2D Brownian functions for one of the components, and the other one is slightly modified so that we have correlations between the two components. So we hope that using some vectorial structure, we will learn from evaluations of each component. We will enrich the acquisition criterion. Okay, and so we take the example I have shown you. So we have here each feasible set. So with blue, in blue the boundaries, and here you have an intersection. And here we show that it works well, but in fact we were a little bit upset because in that case we do not do much better by using the vectorial criterion. And the vectorial criterion is much more costly to evaluate. So if you look here, you see that with alternating criterion or with Pareto scalar, we do some good job. And we wanted to know a little bit more about that. Are there some situations where we know that one of the criterion is very bad? And first, we wanted to take into account the time, because here, in the previous slide, you just take into account the iterations here. So we had 30 iterations. So now we would like to take into account the time. So for different repetitions, we are looking at the data profile. That is, we want to be below we want that the error is below some threshold, but not only for one step, but for all the successive steps. And here we have chosen, so the threshold 1010, and we have chosen different evaluation times of the model to compare. So, and the top line, you will see it is the framework where the model is expensive to evaluate, 3 hours per evaluation. In the middle line, it is 10 minutes, and in the bottom line, it is 1 minute. And we have repeated 40 times this experiment with initial design of size 5 and with 30 iterations. And here we see that, in fact, the results depend on the time evaluation of the model, and the vectorial case is better when the model is hard to compute. So here it's 3 hours, and you see that in that case, you can have some advantage in choosing the vectorial framework. Otherwise, the alternating Bichon is, the Pareto scalar is doing well, and the alternative criterion also. And in particular, here you see that if the model is very fast to evaluate, so that one is the alternating criterion is the best one. So there is no universal answer to the choice of the method. And also, there are some cases where we know that alternating is very bad. So we wanted to convince about that. So, for example, I changed the threshold. So that time, instead of 10,000, we choose 10,000. And we see here, it's not that I forgot to put the curve here. It's just that the error is 0 from the beginning. In fact, this component, in that case, is very easy to recover. So we recover it from the beginning. And if we alternate, we lose time because we are just coming back to this component. And in fact, we already perfectly know it from the first iteration. And we see that in that case, the alternating scalar criterion fails because we come back, every 2 steps, we come back to the criterion for the second component. So in some cases where some component is very easy to learn, this criterion is bad. Okay, and just here to show the application on the wind turbine simulator. Maybe I look at time, maybe I will skip that, just show the picture. So we had to choose some criterion to evaluate if it is good or not, the pre-calibration. So we measure the pre-calibration by comparing experimental data with simulated data, and we compare it for the modes and also for the frequencies. And then we use some transformation, the logarithm transformation, to define GI in order to have a measure which is between -infinity and +infinity, and to use Gaussian processes to emulate it. And so for that example, the 3 methods were working rather well. I will discuss this in the conclusions. So just I would go quick on the second example where we have some uncontrolled variable. So here the driving cycle. So I won't be very long. So just I remind you the application. So we have some input that we do not control, which is the driving cycle. And so here there are examples of different driving cycles. So we see that they can vary a lot with accelerations and deceleration and so on. If you are driving on a high-speed road, for example. And what is the mathematical formulation of the problem? We consider that we have a black box which takes functional input because driving cycle is functional. We have some controlled parameters, x, and so the output here is random because the driving cycle, we will model it by a random variable. Okay, because we cannot control it. So we will control it as a random variable with values in the functional space here. And so we have different ways to define robustness in that framework. And so either you define, you want to be robust almost surely, or in great probability, or it is what we have chosen for this work in expectation. So we want that the expectation, so if you average with respect to the uncontrolled variable, you want to be below some threshold. So of course you have to take a tolerance here because of approximation errors. So it is what we looked at, the estimation of this set. And from what were the data that we had? In fact, the driving cycle, we didn't have the simulator for emulating different driving cycles. We have just a set of several driving cycles, and we have to pick in this set of driving cycles. But we have a lot of driving cycles, so we want to make subsampling. And so there are 2 strategies to do that. So either you choose at each step a point which is good to emulate the expectation, and then you have to choose a new curve to outperform the estimation of the expectation. So in that case, it's not symmetric. The role of the uncontrolled variable and the control parameter is not the same. Here you use quantization to learn the expectation, and here you use some tools that I have showed you. In particular, here we use the criterion with Vorobiev deviation. And the second strategy, then here you choose to model the full function g, that is that one, which depends on x and v. You model it by a coupled Gaussian random field, which takes as inputs both the control parameter and the driving cycle. And we compare the different strategies. So in one case, the design of experiments look like this. You have some repetition, okay? And because you want to estimate the expectation for each x. And in the second framework, you see that you have no repetition. The points are they are all around the square. Okay, so I don't go in the detail, but with such an approach, also we had a trick because we used Karhunen-Loeb decomposition to model the uncertainty in the driving cycle, and we used some cutoff. That is, we truncated the Karhunen-Loeb decomposition. But each time, for evaluating the model, we didn't evaluate the model on the truncated curve, but on the full curve. So in some sense, we were robust to the truncation, because each time with the criterion, we choose a vector corresponding to the different components in the Karhunen-Loeb decomposition. But then, instead of taking this vector, we take the curve which corresponds to this vector. But never mind, we have a truncation, so we have some issues with that. So I go just to the curves. So here, it is an example. So we have different truncation levels. So we see that even if we pick the true curve, if the truncation level is too low at a moment, we are stagnating. So we see that we have an issue. How can we choose the truncation argument, M? And it is why we propose an adaptive way to choose this argument. So it is here in pink. So at the beginning, you choose a truncation level of M equal 2, and then it starts to stagnate, you go to 3, and so on. And by the way, you avoid some cost of implementation, because you start with a low truncation argument, and you increasing it adaptively when you need. Sorry. Okay, and just on the real application, so here we have the driving cycle. So we were, here we chose to, we didn't implement the adaptive strategy here, because at that time we didn't have developed it. So we worked in dimension 22 for the second strategy. And we see that the results, so here in red, you have the results for the second strategy, and in blue, the result for the first strategy. They are different, so which one is the good one? Because here it's real life, we have no validation. And in fact, we decided to push further the first strategy. And when we push it further, we see that this spurious component disappears. So in fact, we see that the red solution was the good one, and so that the second strategy is better with the same number of iterations. But of course, the cost is not the same. Okay, so just some conclusion. Here we have leveraged Bayesian active learning to learn feasible sets, which appear in many applications. And we have proposed different criterion, which are more or less robust depending on the applications. Also, we have extended to vector output models. And one of the reasons it was not so efficient is that we used a rather simple structure for multi-output Gaussian random fields. And it is one of the extensions we would like to work on is to get some results with more general covariance structures. because here the structure was rather simple. And also, of course, we have to leverage the problem of we have to tackle the issue, sorry, of output dimension, because here with 2 outputs, it's already costly. So if we want to work with more outputs, we have to think about something else. And also, an interesting question is how can we tackle the problem of rare events? So if the volume of the feasible set is very, very small, then of course we cannot use the same methodologies. We have to make other tricks to leverage this problem. Okay, and also, what about feasible set estimation in non-Euclidean domains? Because here the feasible sets were defined on RD, but in many applications, the world is different from RD, and we would like to extend these results. So thank you very much for your attention.
Let's ask, obviously there's an expense to these computations, so I wonder if you could give us kind of a rough ballpark for how expensive does your model have to be for this to be worthwhile rather than just random sampling? What's the kind of tipping point?
You mean the time of evaluation of the model? The more the model is expensive, the more it is interesting.
Of course.
Yes, of course. In fact, it depends on the application. I have no generic answer, of course, but if you can apply it with other models, but if you use sur-criterion, stepwise uncertainty reduction, most of the time you do it because your model is really expensive.
And I know you don't have a general answer, but if you were starting out and your model took a second to run, would you bother? Or if it took an hour to run, is it worth doing that? You know, roughly, where does that kind of threshold lie?
If your model is some seconds, it's better not to use stepwise uncertainty criterion because it's expensive to compute. The criterion, you have to compute the criterion, and it's quite expensive.
So minutes at least, you think, before it's worthwhile?
Hours, for example, or even minutes, because it depends on how many times you want to evaluate. If the model, if the feasible set is complex, you need more points to learn it, so it depends also on the form of your model. Not only on the time, but also on its complexity in terms of structure.
And the dimension of the input presumably plays into that as well, makes it...
Yes, the dimension input is into play because you look at a Gaussian process and subset of RD, and so the computations are higher if input space is high.
So I had a PhD student who was looking at the rare event problem, and what we did was we built an emulator. We predicted where the rare event was for the emulator. It's very bad, but then you zoom in and you keep zooming in on this area and improving the emulator only in the area of the rare event.
Oh, like multi-level, in some sense, a multi-level version.
It'd be interesting to see how that would combine with your rather more theoretical. Ours was very pragmatic.
Yes.
But it would be nice to see how they combine.
So you reduce the feasible set at each step.
Yeah. So you keep finding a better approximation to the feasible set all the time. Now, we may miss things because our emulator is very bad to start with. But yeah, that's the sort of thing. Sure. Would it be nice, because you've got a lot of theory. We didn't have any theory.
I was wondering if you did simulations with something else than, for example, the Matern Gaussian process. Because you can pick, for example, a prior which the posterior is learning way more locally. So, for example, there's the work of Amin Haji, who's looking at like this then was for simulating Matern processes where you just group only the local data and then you locally compute the posterior only on a small patch of the global thing, and then you might be able to both get a speed up in computation and like you have less issues that learning near one feasible set will decrease the probability, like will decrease the variance in other regions, and if you have something that remains local, you will have an easier time detecting rare sets, I think.
So you would change the kernel at each step, or
Yeah, or just like something else than a Gaussian process.
in fact, we didn't try with something else because these kernels are supposed to be flexible, and we take something global. But if you know that, of course, some regions are highly different from other ones, if you have non-stationary, because here, in some sense, you assume some stationarity.
Yeah.
If you have non-stationarities, of course, you have to think about something different, and maybe looking locally at different, with different zooms could be good.
Yeah, it could be interesting to like
Yeah, sure.
try it.
Let's thank Jonathan again for a lot of